When 11 Marines got trapped in enemy territory during the worst storm in years, every male pilot said the rescue mission was impossible. But Captain Sarah Martinez grabbed her helmet, fired up her medical helicopter, and flew alone into the deadly storm that everyone said would kill her. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The storm clouds gathered like an army on the horizon, dark and threatening, as Captain Sarah Martinez stood on the helicopter pad at Forward Operating Base Alpha. At 28, she was one of the most skilled flight medics in the unit, but her male colleagues still treated her like she was only good for routine medical transports. The wind whipped across the base, rattling the anchored helicopters and sending dust devils spinning across the tarmac. Inside the briefing room, Colonel Jenkins spread a tactical map across the table, his weathered face grim. "Gentlemen," he began, though Sarah was sitting right there among the pilots, "we have 11 Marines from Bravo Company pinned down at grid 234 to 567. Multiple casualties, heavy enemy contact, and this storm is only getting worse." Thunder rumbled overhead, making the lights flicker ominously. Major Thompson, the lead assault pilot, leaned forward with concern. "Sir, what's the weather looking like?" he asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. Colonel Jenkins didn't sugarcoat it. "Winds gusting to 60 knots, lightning activity, visibility near zero. And that's before we factor in the RPGs and small arms fire waiting for us." The room fell deadly silent. Sarah raised her hand confidently. "Colonel, the medevac bird is prepped and ready." "I can," but Thompson cut her off immediately. "Sarah, this isn't a routine hospital run. These boys are in a hot LZ with heavy enemy contact. The weather alone could kill you, never mind the Taliban." Captain Rodriguez, another pilot, nodded in agreement. "Thompson's right. This is a suicide mission. No pilot should attempt this flight, especially not." He trailed off, not wanting to say what everyone was thinking, especially not a woman. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "Especially not what, Rodriguez? Someone who's flown over 200 combat missions? Someone who knows these mountains better than any of you." Colonel Jenkins held up his hand for silence. The radio crackled to life with urgent voices from the trapped Marines. Static filled with pain and desperation. "Base, this is Bravo 6. We've got 3 critical, 2 urgent surgical. We need immediate medevac or we're going to lose them." The voice was strained, fighting through interference and the sound of gunfire. Thompson shook his head firmly. "Sir, I've flown in bad weather before, but this is beyond anything reasonable. The thermals alone will tear a bird apart, and the enemy has the high ground. They'll light us up the moment we appear." The other pilots murmured their agreement, faces pale at the thought of flying into that nightmare. Sarah stood up, her compact frame radiating determination. "With respect, sir, while you're all talking about why it can't be done, 11 Marines are bleeding out. Every minute we waste debating is a minute closer to losing them." Her voice carried the authority of someone who had saved lives under impossible conditions before. "Martinez," Colonel Jenkins said carefully, "I admire your courage, but Thompson's right. This storm is unprecedented. The wind shear alone could slam you into a mountainside before you even reach the LZ." Outside, lightning illuminated the briefing room windows, followed by a crash of thunder that seemed to shake the building's foundation. "Sir," Sarah replied, pulling out her flight charts, "I've studied these weather patterns for months. The storm has a natural break in the wind patterns here and here." She pointed to specific locations on the map. "If I approach from the north and use the valley thermals to my advantage, I can ride the updrafts and minimize exposure time." Lieutenant Morrison, the youngest pilot in the room, looked skeptical. "Even if you somehow make it through the storm, Sarah, how do you plan to handle 11 casualties by yourself? That's physically impossible for one person." The others nodded, seeing this as the final nail in the argument. Sarah's eyes flashed. "I've been training for exactly this scenario. My medical equipment is organized for rapid triage, and I can stabilize the critical patients first while the others provide support. I'm smaller than any of you, which means I can move through tight spaces faster and more efficiently." She had always turned her perceived disadvantage into a strength. The radio crackled again, more urgent this time. "Base Bravo 6. We've lost contact with 2 of our wounded. Request immediate extraction. Weather's getting worse up here." The desperation in the Marine's voice cut through the room like a knife, making everyone's decision feel heavier. Major Thompson stood up, his face showing genuine concern for Sarah rather than dismissal. "Look, Martinez, we all know you're a hell of a pilot and medic, but this isn't about proving yourself. This is about staying alive. Those Marines wouldn't want you to die trying to save them. His tone was protective, almost paternal. That's exactly why I have to try, Sarah replied, her voice softening but losing none of its resolve. Because they would never abandon me. Because that's what we do, we bring everyone home. She looked around the room at each of their faces. I understand the risks. I've calculated them. But I also know that doing nothing guarantees 11 families get folded flags instead of their sons coming home. Colonel Jenkins studied her for a long moment, weighing the impossible decision. The storm outside seemed to be getting stronger, rattling the windows with each gust. The ceiling is dropping fast. If you're going to attempt this, it has to be now. But Martinez, I cannot order you to take this mission. This has to be your choice. It is my choice, sir, Sarah said without hesitation. It always has been. She was already mentally running through her pre-flight checklist, visualizing every step of the dangerous journey ahead. The room remained silent except for the storm raging outside. Thompson made one final attempt. Sarah, at least take a co-pilot. Take Morrison or Rodriguez. Don't do this alone. But Sarah shook her head. Every pound matters in this weather. The helicopter will handle better with just me, and I'll have more room for medical equipment and casualties. I fly better solo anyway, no one to second-guess my decisions. As she headed toward the door, Captain Rodriguez called out. Martinez, if you change your mind out there, no one will think less of you for turning back. She paused at the threshold and looked back at him. The Marines don't have the luxury of changing their minds, Rodriguez. Neither do I. The hangar was a fury of activity as Sarah performed her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision. Chief Warrant Officer Jackson, the maintenance chief, watched her nervously. Ma'am, I've gone over every system twice. She's in perfect condition, but in this weather. He gestured helplessly at the storm outside. Jackson, Sarah said, checking her medical supplies one final time, you've never let me down. I trust this bird because I trust your work. She secured her emergency medical kit and double-checked her communication equipment. Monitor my radio frequency. If I go down, at least you'll know where to look for wreckage. The UH-60M medevac helicopter sat ready, its Red Cross markings barely visible in the driving rain. Sarah climbed into the pilot's seat, running through her startup procedures with practiced efficiency. The familiar hum of the engines spinning up was comforting, a sound she had heard thousands of times before. Tower, this is Medevac 1-1 requesting clearance for immediate departure to grid 234 to 567, she radioed, her voice calm and professional despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. The reply came back immediately, Medevac 1-1, weather conditions are beyond minimums. Strongly advised delay until storm passes. Tower, I understand the conditions. I have 11 urgent casualties requiring immediate extraction. I'm declaring a medical emergency and taking responsibility for this flight. Sarah's hands moved across the controls with confident precision, preparing for the most dangerous flight of her career. Copy Medevac 1-1. Godspeed. The tower controller's voice carried a weight of emotion that broke protocol, but everyone knew what this mission meant. Sarah lifted off into the storm, immediately feeling the helicopter buck and fight against the violent wind. Rain hammered the windscreen like bullets and visibility dropped to almost zero. She flew by instruments alone, trusting her training and experience to guide her through the chaos. The first few minutes were the worst. Wind shear nearly threw the helicopter into a mountainside, and lightning struck so close that her instruments briefly flickered. But Sarah's steady hands and years of training kept the aircraft level and on course. She used every trick she knew about flying in severe weather, riding the thermals and finding pockets of calmer air between the worst of the turbulence. Bravo 6, this is Medevac 1-1 inbound to your position, she radioed as she approached the landing zone. The response was barely audible through the static and storm interference. Medevac 1-1, be advised heavy enemy contact from the ridgeline. LZ is hot, I say again, LZ is hot. Sarah could see muzzle flashes through the rain as she approached the small clearing where the Marines were trapped. Enemy fire erupted from multiple positions, tracer rounds cutting through the darkness like deadly fireflies. She had to land in the middle of it all with no cover and no backup. The landing was a nightmare of precision flying. Sarah had to compensate for wind, enemy fire, and the uneven terrain all at once. The helicopter touched down hard, bouncing once before settling. Immediately, Marines began running toward the aircraft, carrying wounded comrades through the driving rain. Doc, thank God you made it. Sergeant Williams shouted over the rotor noise as he helped load the first casualty. Sarah was already working, assessing wounds and starting IVs while bullets cracked overhead. Her medical training took over, hands moving with practiced efficiency even as the helicopter rocked under enemy fire. The first casualty was critical, a young Marine with a sucking chest wound and massive blood loss. Sarah worked quickly, sealing the wound and establishing 2 large-bore IVs while directing the other Marines and loading additional casualties. Her small size allowed her to move easily around the cramped cabin, reaching patients that larger medics might struggle to treat effectively. "How many more?" she called out to Sergeant Williams as she worked on the second critical patient, a Marine with a traumatic brain injury and compound fractures. "4 more critical, 3 walking wounded," he replied, his voice tight with stress. "We've been holding this position for 6 hours, but we're almost out of ammo." Enemy fire intensified, and Sarah felt the helicopter shudder as rounds struck the fuselage. Sparks flew from damaged electronics, but the bird remained flyable. She continued working on her patients, her steady hands never wavering despite the chaos around her. This was what she had trained for, what she was born to do. Loading 11 casualties into a helicopter designed for 6 required every bit of Sarah's organizational skills and medical knowledge. She positioned the most critical patients where she could monitor them continuously during flight, while ensuring the walking wounded could assist with medical care if needed. Every movement was calculated, every decision made with split-second precision. "Everyone's loaded," Williams shouted, climbing aboard as the last casualty was secured. "Go, go, go." Sarah was already pulling pitch, lifting the overloaded helicopter into the storm-torn sky. The aircraft struggled under the weight, requiring every bit of her flying skill to maintain controlled flight. The flight back to base was a continuous battle against weather and gravity. The overloaded helicopter fought her every command, and the storm seemed determined to tear them from the sky. But Sarah's experience and training shone through. She found every patch of stable air, rode every thermal, and coaxed maximum performance from the struggling aircraft. In the cabin behind her, she worked medical miracles while flying through hell. Using her headset to communicate, she directed the walking wounded and providing care to their more seriously injured comrades. "Williams, I need you to hold pressure on that chest wound. Morrison, keep talking to the head injury, don't let him lose consciousness." Lightning struck the helicopter directly, temporarily blinding everyone and causing several systems to fail. But Sarah maintained control, flying by instinct and experience when her instruments gave conflicting readings. The aircraft bucked and rolled in the turbulence, but her steady hands kept them airborne and on course. "Base, this is Medevac 1-1 inbound with 11 casualties. Request immediate medical team standing by," she radioed as the base came into view through the storm. The relief in the tower controller's voice was obvious. "Medevac 1-1, we have full medical team standing by. You're cleared for immediate landing." The landing was another test of Sarah's skills. The helicopter was tail-heavy with casualties and equipment, making it want to tip backward. But she managed a controlled landing, setting the aircraft down gently despite the challenging conditions. Medical personnel swarmed the helicopter before the rotors stopped spinning. As the casualties were unloaded and rushed to the field hospital, Sarah remained in her seat for a moment, hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline. She had done the impossible, flown solo into a storm that grounded experienced male pilots, extracted 11 casualties from a hot landing zone, and brought them all home alive. Colonel Jenkins appeared at her window, rain streaming down his face. "Martinez, that was the finest piece of flying I've ever witnessed. Those Marines are alive because of your courage and skill." Behind him, the other pilots stood in silent acknowledgement of what she had accomplished. Major Thompson approached as Sarah shut down the helicopter. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I was wrong to doubt your abilities. You proved today that courage and skill matter more than gender or size." The other pilots nodded in agreement, their respect evident in their faces. "Sir," Sarah replied, climbing down from the cockpit, "I didn't do this to prove anything to anyone. I did it because those Marines needed help and I was the only one willing to try." Her flight suit was soaked with rain and blood from treating casualties, but her eyes showed the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. Later that night, as the storm finally passed, Sarah stood on the flight line looking at her damaged helicopter. Bullet holes stitched across the fuselage, and lightning damage was visible on several systems. But the bird had brought everyone home just as she had promised. Sergeant Williams approached, his arm in a sling from the mission. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you personally. My Marines are alive because you had the guts to fly when no one else would. We won't forget what you did for us today." His voice carried the deep respect that only comes from shared combat experience. "Sergeant," Sarah replied, "that's what we do. We take care of each other. Gender doesn't matter when lives are on the line." She looked at the damaged helicopter with pride. "This old bird and I, we make a good team. She got us all home safe." The story of Captain Sarah Martinez's solo rescue mission spread quickly through the military community. Her willingness to fly into impossible conditions, her expert flying skills, and her life-saving medical care under fire became legendary. But for Sarah, the greatest reward was simple. 11 Marines went home to their families instead of coming home in flag-draped coffins. The storm had tested everyone that day, but it was Sarah's determination, skill, and courage that made the difference. She proved that heroism comes in all sizes and genders, and that sometimes the person everyone doubts is exactly the person you need when the impossible must be done. In the end, she didn't just save 11 Marines, she earned the respect and admiration of every person who witnessed her extraordinary act of courage. From that day forward, no one at Forward Operating Base Alpha ever questioned Captain Sarah Martinez's abilities again. She had flown into a storm that grounded veteran pilots and brought everyone home alive. The female medic who flew alone into the storm had become a legend, not because she was a woman who proved herself, but because she was a warrior who answered the call when others could not.